Hello and welcome to the Peace Talk, this time with Azzam al-Kassir. Al-Kassir is a political scientist and researcher based in London. His research interests are modern political Islamic thought, radical Islamism, and the complex geopolitics of the Middle East. He is specialized in analyzing the framing process within social movements, particularly focusing on the discursive and strategic transformation of Salafi jihadist groups. Azzam wrote his PhD thesis on the change and continuity in the thought and practice of Salafi jihadism by studying the case of the Al-Nusra Front in Syria between 2012 and 2018. And maybe we can talk in this interview also on the transformation of the Al-Nusra Front, HTS, and Idlib, and many other stuffs. So thank you, dear Azzam, that you followed my invitation. It's a great honor and pleasure to have you on this program.
Thank you so much, Joseph. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Thanks for inviting me for this episode. I'm happy to contribute to this.
So let's begin with my first question. After the fall of the dictator Bashar al-Assad, what did actually change after the fall of Assad?
Well, I think the most visible change is the feelings of happiness that are like sweeping across the country. You can tell that everyone is happy, everyone just excited about the change, like what happened. I understand there are many concerns. People, they have many concerns about the future of the country, the direction we are moving in. But still, what happened and the speed that it happened through, it was a surprise, but was a good surprise for everyone. So yeah, I think many people are thinking of visiting the country again, thinking of about the future of the country. Now there are new opportunities emerging. Still, there are many challenges, but still there are some opportunities. So there is this window that people are trying to use. So yeah, it's like I think the most like apparent or remarkable thing is this feeling of happiness and optimism across the country.
I hope they will not get disappointed, and I hope everything will turn out the right way and
Yeah.
in a democratic way. Even experts, I did an interview almost 1 day or 2 days after the fall of Assad and after the surprising and fast war that was won by HTS. And 1 or 2 days ago, I had before that I had an interview with an expert and from the Kurdish who was living in Kamishli, who is actually from Kamishli, and he didn't expect it, and he said, "No, Assad, this is a powerhouse. He cannot fall. Russia is behind him. Iran is behind him. This will never happen." And 2 days ago,
Yeah.
2 days after, it came. Yeah, things escalated quickly. So how is that? Yeah, what is your explanation for the
Yeah.
surprise?
I think enough with talking about feelings. Now let's talk politics. Okay, the feelings are like everyone is happy, but still, politically speaking, there is a sense of uncertainty. Things happened very quickly. We knew before that the Syrian regime is much weaker than it seems, but no one expected this collapse to happen suddenly as it happens. Uh, so uh, the Syrian regime, I think, was preoccupied with managing the economy, which was just collapsing, gradually collapsing. The Syrian economy was collapsing. So the regime, towards the end of its life, wasn't able to just sustain the basic activities of the government, of the military, all the institutions. And then when these factions, they decided to have this military campaign so quickly and so decisively, the Syrian regime wasn't fully prepared. Uh, their soldiers were in a state of they were paralyzed. They couldn't do anything. The command chain wasn't clear for them. Every leader, military leader, was giving their own like making their own decisions. So this there was a state of chaos, militarily speaking. So when the factions started this campaign, the Syrian regime's points started to fall one by one. The first major city to fall was Aleppo, which is, as you know, probably it's a major center in the north of the country. So Aleppo collapsed, and then the factions advanced towards the second most important city in the north, which is Hama. They captured Hama, and then you know the rest of the story, how they captured then Homs, and then they reached Damascus. The Syrian regime was not able to confront this campaign. It wasn't prepared. Geopolitically, the backers of the Syrian regime they were also surprised by the campaign of the opposition. So they made this calculation: is it worth to put all our weight behind this collapsing regime, or it's a hopeless case? Apparently, they reached a conclusion that's it's a losing bet here. They couldn't count on the Syrian regime's ability to withstand this campaign. So the decision was made to okay, the regime is collapsing now. Let's manage this transition. So there was a round of negotiations that quickly happened in Doha, only one day before before Assad left to Moscow. They allowed, or they encouraged, factions which were controlling the southern part of the country to advance towards Damascus. So not only Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and the rest of the deterrence campaign to reach Damascus. So they decided, okay, let's allow other factions. So in the future, it becomes easier to have negotiations about some kind of diversity in terms of the new elite, the new emerging elite that are ruling in Damascus. So they captured Damascus, and like logically, you would understand that the leading party was Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. So the leader of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham became a de facto ruler of the country. And he was able to contain other factions through like a process of negotiations, putting pressure on others. So he managed to contain the situation and became the only de facto ruler. Still, so far, he's trying to maintain his position. It's much more difficult than it seemed at the beginning. Like later, he found himself obliged to negotiate with the factions controlling Suwaida in the south, Daraa as well. You still have this huge problem in the east with called STF. And of course, there are some individual scattered. There are some incidents, security incidents in different places, especially in the coastal areas. So the scene is much complicated than it seemed at the beginning. It's becoming clear that it's not easy. However, there are some signs that, okay, the international community is extending a hand to the new ruler. There is kind of unofficial recognition of the new authority, but it's still, it seems it's conditional, which is, in my assessment, it's good. It's good to have a conditional cooperation with the new regime. So probably if you can affect like leading this the new regime to change its behavior, to become more tolerant, given that they come from a very conservative background. Yeah.
I
So
understand.
the scene at the moment.
Yeah, thank you for your analysis. And you mentioned earlier that people are happy about the transition and that the dictator is gone. And many people are going back to Syria, and they try to build a new life. How safe is Syria? Because I'm asking because many people are returning, and on the other hand, we see that there are still some fights going on. Yeah, how safe is Syria actually?
Well, it's not totally safe, but I was talking about the optimism like emanating from the fact that we got rid of Assad. This is the most important factor here. Dealing with the day-to-day problems, it's another issue. many areas in the country are not totally safe. The new regime is not in full control of the situation. There are some factions and groups that are working outside the official body of the government, raising many concerns about the ability of the regime to contain or control the country. The discourse of Al-Julani Ahmad Shara, who is the leader of the new government, the discourse is really good. He's trying to reassure people, okay, we don't have like problems with any sects or any social groups, but still, he's not the only one who is in charge. You have the second and third level of leaders. Some of them are obedient, they follow the rules. Others are more independent and they follow their own agendas and pushed by revenge and asserting their power and dominance in the areas where they control. So the official orders are good, but in practice, there are many difficulties. As I said, these fighters, they exhibit different levels of obedience, different ideological backgrounds, and also add to this the fact that some gangs and some criminals, they are functioning in this chaotic situation. So in terms of safety and security, there are many challenges. We are hoping that in the near future, there should be more serious effort to control the situation. But as I said, the optimism is emerging like following the collapse of the Assad regime. But building a new country, a new stable country, it's going to take some time. So yeah, this is in terms of security and safety. Politically speaking, it's even more complicated. We can talk about this.
Yeah, please. You can elaborate on this as well. Yes.
Yeah, this is I said practically in terms of the managing the security scene, it's complicated, but politically, the main feature now is ambiguity, and this kind of there's no clarity about the future of the country, the direction where we are moving. First of all, we don't have a constitution. You would imagine, like with the arrival of the new, with this new administration, they changed everything. Now the constitution is not in function, so there was this kind of dilemma. How do you establish a new rule and you don't have any kind of recognized constitution? You don't have, you're not following certain procedures. So people tolerated. Okay, they said, okay, now we need these guys. They have the power. They were the only ones who were able to defeat Assad and still control the country. So let's give them a chance. But this should be like a temporary and for a limited period. So Ahmed Shara, the new ruler, he promised recently in a speech that he will lead a new trajectory. He will take a new trajectory that consists of steps. One of them is to hold a national dialogue, a round of national dialogue, and then establish a constitutional declaration or something like this, a charter or something temporary, until we reach the stage where we can have a committee to create or start a new constitution for the country. So he kept it general. He said these general terms, he used general terms. Personally, I understand, okay, it's fine to use general terms at this stage, but this should not last for long. Following that, you need a detailed plan for the future, so we know that we are moving in the right direction. This is reassuring, starting these steps, but there are many other concerns. Well, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham itself, as you mentioned, I studied Hayat Tahrir al-Sham in detail in their past and the changes that happened to them. The experience of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, it's a unique experience. in many aspects. It's good in a way that they showed flexibility, which is unprecedented. I mean, the level of flexibility they showed, it is good, but people forget that still, even though they are flexible, they maintain some very conservative views. They are still Islamists, they are conservative. So within this atmosphere of optimism that swept across the countries recently, people thought, okay, now we'll have democracy, we'll have separation, we'll separate these powers, and we'll have like a civil state as you would imagine, like any other democratic state. But these people, they don't understand the language of the modern state. They are new to this. We need to take this into consideration. So when I present some analysis, I say to people, uh, it's good to be optimistic. It's good to give them chance, but you need to understand their background. They are constrained. They are limited to certain beliefs. Apart from ideology as well, they have other pressing, or they have other factions who are more conservative than they are, who are putting pressure on them, because in the past they had to make some kind of concessions to have coalitions with other more radical and extremist factions, so they need them as well. So the pressure is not coming only from the direction of the liberals, people who advocate for a civil state. The pressure is coming from every direction. So we need to manage expectations. So this is the message I would advise everyone. Managing expectations is very important, but still we need to be very vigilant and put pressure from every direction to invite them to make more tangible changes towards a democratic state. Practically, they never mentioned the democratic state. They exhibited, or they uphold some elements of a democratic state, but not entirely. They don't want to say it explicitly. I understand, like, giving their background, it's going to be unimaginable for them to suddenly become advocates of democracy and including other political and social groups and representing them in the government. So yeah, I think like the upcoming weeks and months will be very important to understand to what level they will be flexible and implement some elements of democracy and civil state. So we are waiting to see.
By flexibility, you mean that Abu Muhammad al-Julani, and correct me if I'm wrong, he fought for Al-Qaeda, then Al-Nusra, then he fought again first he fought with them and then against them, and now he seemed to be more moderate and more he promised more tolerance, and also he is giving religious freedom to the regions, so they can express their, feelings and their religion. In this sense, he's flexible. Am I right? And what about his history and this ambivalence that many countries are till this day calling HTS a terrorist organization? So how can we put the because it's complicated.
Academically speaking, it's a very interesting case, actually. It's worth studying in depth. The changes that happened to HTS, and before it became HTS, was Jabhat al-Nusra. From that time, the change is unprecedented, and they show a unique case. So you cannot apply the things that happened to the Taliban, to Al-Qaeda, to other groups. You cannot apply these frameworks to Jabhat al-Nusra and later HTS. They developed their own example, their own case, which I will talk about briefly. They started in late 2011. So the Syrian uprising started in March 2011. So after about 8 or 9 months, these people, most of these fighters, they came from Iraq, where you had the Islamic State was there in northern Iraq. So they migrated, they came to Syria. Most of them were Syrians, not all of them, but most of them were Syrians. fighting in near Al-Mosul in Iraq. So they joined the fight in Syria, and they established what they called Jabhat al-Nusra li Ahl al-Sham. I mean, like al-Nusra Front to support the people of the Levant. And then it was clear that they are very effective militarily speaking, very effective. They managed to like cause considerable damage to the Syrian regime, and the name became very famous and well known across Syria, Jabhat al-Nusra. So towards the end of the year 2012, they were classified as a terrorist organization by the U.S. Foreign Office, and they were classified because they were not directly affiliated with Al-Qaeda or the Islamic State in Iraq. They were independent, but still their discourse was Salafi jihadist. Because they were talking about jihad as the main method to achieve political aspirations. So it was typical in a way. In 2013, ISIS, it wasn't ISIS at the time, it was still Islamic State of Iraq, entered into Syria, and they asked Jabhat al-Nusra to give allegiance and become part of it or affiliate. But Jabhat al-Nusra refused, and to protect itself, joined Al-Qaeda. So in 2013, they became Al-Qaeda's representatives in Syria, and their official representatives, and remained like this, a typical Al-Qaeda offshoot, or a group belonging to Al-Qaeda, until mid-2016. At the time, the Syrian opposition was controlling Aleppo for a few years, but not the entire city, but most parts of the Aleppo city were under control of the opposition. But they were defeated by the Syrian regime and the Russians towards the end of 2016. And Jabhat al-Nusra was among these factions that left Aleppo and went to Idlib. And at the time, there were pressures on Jabhat al-Nusra to cut ties with Al-Qaeda, because other factions of the Syrian opposition, they wanted to fight along the Jabhat al-Nusra. They wanted to fight with them. But because of the sanctions and because of the classification and designation as a terrorist organization, they were unable to do it officially. Also, some regional countries, they wanted to provide some aid and money to these groups, but because of the sanctions, because it was classified as a terrorist organization, they couldn't. So the pressure was mounting on Jabhat al-Nusra at the time to cut ties. Leader of the organization, Ahmad al-Shara, it was at the time, his name was still unknown, was still just Abu Muhammad al-Julani. He decided to cut ties, and in mid 2016, he said, okay, now we are an independent organization. We are part of the Syrian revolution, and we're going to change the name of the organization. Since then, it became Jabhat Fath al-Sham, only for 6 months. After 6 months, they decided to lead a new coalition. They formed a new coalition called HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which the one we know at the time now. This happened in January 2017. They established HTS. Geographically, HTS controlled Idlib, which is in northwest Syria. So they controlled this part of the country, and at the time there was some truce and deals being struck in different parts of the country. So the Syrian regime was striking deals with fighters from the Syrian opposition, allowing them to just take their light arms and go to Idlib. So Idlib attracted all the factions and became the center for the Syrian opposition. And the main de facto ruler was al-Julani. I think the main feature of this era was Hayat Tahrir al-Sham trying to embed into the Syrian context, breaking away from global jihadism and becoming a local faction. So this from 2017 until today. So there was a clear path towards localization, becoming a Syrian group. In terms to achieve this, they had to fight other jihadis, which were attracting some foreign fighters like ISIS. You have another faction called Hurras ad-Din. So they were in like constantly in fight with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. Recently, they decided to have this coalition with factions of the so-called National Army, which was established by Turkey directly with the Turkish involvement in 2017 and 2018. Turkey sponsored this and supported these some groups which are like they inherited the Free Syrian Army that early emerged during the course of the conflict. So Turkey pushed these factions to form one group, and recently they started to collaborate with HTS, and they led the recent campaign against the Syrian regime. So the trajectory is very interesting academically and in terms of research for people who are studying Islamist movements. Usually, you do not expect them to become or to be this flexible. Al-Julani, he like some people who were very close to him, he got rid of them. He got rid of these people just to achieve a full control first over Idlib and recently over the entire country. So it's a very interesting case. For a while, they followed the example of the Taliban, and they in their discourse they used reference to the Taliban. But now, looking at their experience, they took even, I would say, 10 steps further than the Taliban in terms of moderation and changing course. So yeah, it's worth studying.
Absolutely, yes. There are many outside powers that are involved since the beginning at the Arab upspring and Arab Spring and uprising against the Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad. And Turkey is maybe one of the most prominent foreign power that is involved. They backed up, if I remember correctly, the Syrian National Army, the SNA, and also they are connected to the Al-Nusra Front, and also, yeah, maybe to HTS. So this is let us begin with Turkey, and from there we can discuss also the other players. There are key players. You mentioned earlier Russia was also involved in a campaign against Al-Qaeda. The US is backing the Kurdish movement. Yeah, the Kurdish question is also a very important one, and the relation between HTS and the Kurdish movement. And yeah, but maybe we can talk for hours if we discuss them all one by one. Israel is now occupying a big chunk of the Syrian territory. So maybe we can start by Turkey, and maybe from there you move on to the next one. So yeah, we have the whole picture.
The geopolitical situation is very complicated as well, for many reasons. One of them is that HTS is designated as a terrorist organization, and this prevents regional and international powers or players to directly get involved or support HTS, or even just to negotiate with them explicitly or directly. But under the table, everything was happening. I'm sure there were channels, diplomatic channels, to deal with HTS for many reasons. One of them is managing the humanitarian situation in northwestern Syria. The economy was really bad, like collapsed, almost collapsed, the local economy, because, as I said, it attracted many people from other areas, so it became very dense. And they didn't know how to manage the economy, so they needed aid from outside organizations and bodies. So first of all, the UN needed to collaborate with HTS to deliver aid. So this happened with some kind of cover, political and diplomatic cover. Previously, as I mentioned earlier, uh, regional powers, especially the Gulf states, they wanted to support the Syrian opposition, to give them arms, to give them money. But because of the sanctions, they couldn't do it the way they wanted. So some of the funds were being channeled to HTS or Jabhat al-Nusra before it indirectly. So, okay, the funds and the support will reach factions of the Syrian opposition, and some of these factions, because HTS and Jabhat al-Nusra were very powerful, so they put pressure on other factions to share some of the aid and support they were receiving. So, but still, even though HTS and before it, Jabhat al-Nusra, they had some ties externally, still the main allies of the regional and international powers were factions of the Free Syrian Army at the beginning, and then the national or the SNA factions later. Turkey supplied these factions with direct support, financial, political, diplomatic, in every aspect. They supported them, but still, they were not very effective because they were not homogenized in terms of their political views, in terms of their ideological background, and also in terms of their control. There were many like confrontations on who to control which area and uh, like harvest the local economy. There were many problems among these factions. So although they were Turkey's proxies in Syria, they were not reliable. Turkey could not entirely rely on them to liberate the rest of the country or to do whatever it pleased. This allowed HTS to grow massively and eventually become the dominant player. Turkey's main problem, as you would imagine, it's with the Kurdish factions. This is the main concern for them. Previously, Turkey played a role in fighting ISIS, but still the main concern for them is Kurdish factions. So this, for Turkey, justified supporting these groups, the SNA groups, although they were not very effective militarily. But they were, when Turkey needed them to confront the Kurdish factions, they had to do it. They had to do it. And also but they needed like a direct support from Turkey, from Turkish drones and air defense systems. Other states, if we're talking about, you cannot isolate Turkey from the rest of the, like all the axis in the region. So at the beginning, Turkey was collaborating directly with the Gulf states to channel and deliver the aid to the Syrian factions. Later on, there were some problems between Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar and Turkey. So new axis emerged, I think, towards 2015. So there were clashes of interests and the proxies they have on the ground. And this was reflected also politically, not only militarily, because there were the Syrian coalition and there was the Syrian National Council or something like this. There were many political factions, and because of these contradictions or geopolitical contradictions among Turkey and the Gulf states, the Syrian opposition became marginal, and they couldn't do anything politically, militarily, and every aspect. Within this atmosphere of just ineffectiveness, this allowed factions such as HTS and previously even, like, you cannot isolate this from the rise of ISIS, actually. ISIS was able to expand because of the lack of any solid power among the Syrian opposition. So these geopolitical contradictions affected the situation on the ground and led the conflict to last for 13 years although towards like 2013, the Syrian regime was very weak, and everyone wasn't imagining that it could last for another 10 years. But this happened because of the weakness of the Syrian opposition. Yeah.
And what about Iran? And maybe we can. They are different. So let's maybe discuss them separate. I wanted to say Iran and Russia, but they have maybe
Yeah, I think
colliding similar, but also colliding interests.
we
So
can talk about supporters of the Syrian regime. We can start with Iran and then Russia, because they did have some common objectives and of course some contradictions as well. To start with Iran and Russia, both of them, they were the main backers of the Syrian regime, but they were more committed to supporting the regime than what the commitment of Turkey and the Gulf states when they supported the opposition. So Iran put all its weight behind the Syrian regime to sustain it and ensure that it will survive. They provided huge sums of money. They sent some militias, weapons, and everything. They supported the Syrian regime. And without this support, the Syrian regime couldn't stand a day since 2014-15 and onwards, couldn't without the full support of Iran. Until they reach a point where they couldn't make any decision without Iran's direct involvement. They had to ensure that Iran allows this. Add to this the involvement of Hezbollah. Hezbollah got involved directly and which led to eventually for it to become exposed when Israel decided to wage a war against Hezbollah. So this weakened Hezbollah, but at the same time, the involvement of Hezbollah allowed Bashar al-Assad to remain in power for almost 10 years after it was collapsing. In 2015, the Syrian opposition led a coalition. It's called Jaish al-Fatah, which is the Conquest Army. It was a broad coalition, military coalition. They liberated many areas from this. They took control of many areas from the Syrian regime. And it became clear that the regime is almost collapsing. It's very weak. Although Iran is supporting it, it's not enough. And the opposition is still expanding. They are taking control of some major urban centers like Idlib, previously Raqqa fell, and other cities were almost falling. So the Syrian regime invited Russia to get directly involved in 2015. And if you remember at the time, ISIS was expanding as well. So the international community was concerned about this. So it's not only an opposition and the regime. It's more complicated than this. It's not a popular uprising. You have terrorist organizations taking control of vast areas. So they allowed Russia to get involved on some conditions, that it will also face not only the Syrian opposition and back the Syrian regime, but also help in fighting and facing the growing danger of ISIS. And this happened actually. So Russia was waging a double war, sometimes hitting targets that belong to ISIS and other times hitting factions of the Free Syrian Army and sometimes al-Nusra or other groups. But the main point was to sustain and ensure the survival of the regime. And this changed the entire equation. It supported the Syrian regime, and after that, allowing it to recapture Aleppo, which gave the Syrian regime a huge push at the time. In 2016, everyone was saying, okay, now a full victory for the regime is in sight. You can see that the regime is regaining important parts of the country and the opposition is retreating. The main mistake that the Syrian regime made is that it allowed the opposition to sit comfortably in one corner of the country. allowed them for years, saying, okay, let them do whatever they want. I want to like manage other things. I need to restore diplomatic channels and affairs with other states. I want to ensure that we have some of the sanctions removed, and this was the main concern for the Syrian regime. So they said they said to themselves, let the opposition just stay in one corner. It's fine. We don't need to manage the economy there. Let them like bear the consequences of this. But this gave the opposition space and resources to reorganize themselves and prepare for another battle in a time where when the regime was, as I mentioned towards the beginning of this interview, that the regime was facing serious issues, especially with Sweden in the south going out of the state's control. Uh, there was some movements in the coastal areas, in the central areas as well. People were complaining about the deteriorating economic situation. So the regime was busy with these questions and forgot about preparing its military. And this explains why the military campaign that was led 2 or 3 months ago was able to achieve what it achieved so quickly and so decisively.
And
Yeah.
you mentioned many times that Abu Muhammad al-Julani is flexible, and maybe one aspect of his flexibility is also that he said that both Iran and Russia are partners, important partners for Syria. And on the other hand, we see that the Khomeini air base or the naval base in Tartus, the Russian bases, they are some experts are saying that Russian soldiers should leave or left. So, what is here the point? Also, I can see some sort of ambivalence, and yeah, I cannot read this guy.
Especially when it comes to the relationship with Russia, it's unclear actually what he wants. I think there was a formal visit from like Russian delegate to they visited him in his palace. We don't know what exactly happened there, what they were negotiating about. I think for him it's very important to achieve uh, a, a very symbolic victory, which is bringing Assad to trial, bringing Assad. Okay, now Assad is in Russia. I think he's asking the Russians to uh, give Assad to return Assad to Syria to for him to face a trial here for people to see the dictator paying the price he deserves. I think this is very symbolic, even though you wouldn't like imagine, like, because of the geopolitical and the political differences between Shara and Russia. I think even though they have these differences, I think symbolically it's very important for him. The other thing is, I think, trying to read the mind of Al-Shara. He's trying to playing it smart, balancing geopolitics, like dealing with the Russians, just so the Americans, they don't see, okay, they don't relax and say, okay, now Syria has become uh, like ours or an ally. He's trying to balance this, doing this internationally, but also regionally. So first of all, he visited Saudi Arabia, but also invited the Emir of Qatar to visit Syria. So balancing this Gulf state geopolitical situation, uh, he's still maintaining close ties with Turkey, but also not only with Turkey, with all other regional states. Apart from Iran, because he needs this symbolic victory socially for the popular base that's supporting him. He needs this. He's trying to show that he's very serious. No negotiation with Iran. Iranian nationals are not allowed to visit the country, or yeah, they can. Uh, so he's apart from Iran, he's trying to become or show some flexibility. Now, if you're asking me about the base, the military bases in coastal areas, the Russian bases there, I don't know exactly the future of them. Russia is uh, trying to ensure that they remain in place at least for 5 years, but we still don't know actually. As I mentioned, there was no transparency when it comes to what actually was being negotiated.
It's
Yeah.
complicated, yes. And what about Israel? Israel is now occupying the Golan Heights for many years, but now more than that, more territory.
Yeah.
They framed it like, okay, we need to install a buffer zone and so on. But under international law, of course, it violates international law. How is the HTS stance on this occupation or invasion or yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know how to call it. Yeah.
Yeah. HTS recognizes that the weakness of the country now. Uh, Israel has been bombarding the country for a year now, almost a year. Like every other day, you would have like an incident here or there. They focused most of the Israeli air campaigns. They targeted Iranian targets in Syria, but not all of them. They also recently they waged a military campaign against the bases of the Syrian army. So uh, all the heavy artillery, they were destroyed by Israel. So, but still, I think Israel used this window. Everyone was busy with this political transition. So this Israel thought, okay, now it's the time to prepare for the new era. Regardless who is going to be in power in Syria, the country is not allowed to have a strong army again, regardless of who's going to be pushing the button, as they say. So they waged this campaign, but still, uh, the army is not entirely destroyed. And reading this geopolitically and strategically, you would think for Israel and the rest of the region, no one wants the authorities in Damascus to be completely paralyzed, because you have the danger of, from one side, you have ISIS and other extremists, and still you have regional factions such as the HTS, which is the popular mobilization factions in Iraq. So if these factions or any extremist faction decided to advance towards Damascus or any major city in Syria, you would need some like army or some military factions to be able to withstand these campaigns. So still, there is some power, but it's not a proper army, as you would say. This is on one hand. Secondly, HTS or the new administration wants to like to manufacture or create a new army because they need to they decided to dissolve all the factions. They said, okay, now we're moving from the revolution towards the state, or how states function usually. So, well, let's establish a new army. So they are starting this, but because they are realists towards at the end of the day, they are realists. So, and they know the power they possess. So they don't want a confrontation with Israel or any other regional uh, state. Uh, on the other hand, they want to reassure the West that they are peaceful, they are not concerned about uh, doing harms externally. So they're trying to playing it smart, even though, as you mentioned, Israel advanced in Kontoinhaber, which is next to the Golan Heights, even though uh, the new administration was very soft in the language they used to condemn this. Uh, I was watching a new interview with the new foreign minister. He kept just like talking about different things and avoided directly condemning this or just saying anything, even though legally speaking, as you mentioned, if we're like following the international law, this is illegal. Illegal. And as a state, as someone representing the Syrian state, no one would blame you directly condemn this, but still they are trying to be very diplomatic, reassure everyone. We are starting a new, we're turning a page and starting a new chapter now. So yeah, in this interview, he mentioned, in response to this, he mentioned we are not part of the resistance axis anymore, and we are not concerned about other people's wars. For us, we are very peaceful. We are concerned with leading the country towards stability and so on. So yeah, they are trying to become or use a very diplomatic and careful language when it comes to Israel and regional balance of power.
Thank you, dear Azzam Al Kassir, for this wonderful talk and interview. And I'm praying and hoping that Syria will become a democracy and a free and open society.
Thank you so much, Joseph. It was a pleasure to be with you, actually, and hopefully this could be of any help to anyone. Thank you so much.